Hi, I'm Brian Garman, the artistic director and co-founder of Berkshire Opera Festival. We're going to mix things up a little bit today because I thought it would be interesting to chat with one of the musicians in the Berkshire Opera Festival Orchestra to learn about them and hear their point of view about music generally and about what it's like to play opera specifically. So our principal bassoonist, Zachary Feingold, is with us today. Zach joined the orchestra in 2017 with Ariadne auf Naxos, and of course played Rigoletto in 2018 and Don Pasquale last summer. I'm so glad that he will be joining us again for Mozart's Don Giovanni this August, and equally glad that he's agreed to spend a few minutes with me today. Zach, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Good to be here.
You know, I think it's notable that the musicians in the BOF Orchestra come from all over the country every summer. So where do we find you today?
Today, I am coming to you from lovely central New Jersey.
Central New Jersey, I see. Have you been there throughout this whole mess?
Yes, I grew up here, but I have been here. I have been here through this entire quarantine business.
Good. Well, at least you've had a safe place to hang out, and at least the numbers in New Jersey are going in the right direction as they are here in New York, and importantly, as they are in Massachusetts. I'm very curious to get your perspective on a variety of things today. I wanted first to ask you, a number of our viewers know about many of the standard career trajectories for opera singers, but how does it work for a bassoonist? More specifically, when did you start playing the bassoon, and what has your path been to take you where you are now?
Yeah, sure. So I came to the bassoon relatively later in my musical background, my upbringing. My first instrument is the piano, which I'm actually sitting at right now to talk to you here. And so I played piano, and my background is pop, rock, jazz, singing, singer-songwriter. My dad is a musical person, so that's what he was into. So I grew up with the Beatles and bands similar to. And so when I got to high school, I was in the marching band, and I knew how to count. So they threw drumsticks in my hand, and they told me to hit stuff. Drums, not just not
just anybody who happens by.
Right. Yeah. No. They made that very clear. So I was doing that for the marching band season, and when it came around to concert band time, my band director said, you can't play piano in the concert band, but we need bassoonists. And I said, oh, great. What's a bassoon? I had no idea what a bassoon was. I think I was 15. And I remember him going over to the piano and playing this note. And he said, that's the lowest note the bassoon can play. And I said, okay, cool. Like I'll do that. And so he put the bassoon in my hand, and it was very strange and awkward. And at first, I was doubling parts with the tuba. And so I thought it was this kind of like funny instrument. Like,
Sure.
No one can hear me. I'm just playing 1-5, 1-5-1 with the trombones and the tuba. It's like, what's happening here? And then I think I wound up hearing a recording of Scheherazade, and I've known that piece. I had known it, since I started studying music and piano, but I guess I never really realized that was the bassoon playing that solo.
Sure.
And I thought, wow, this could be a really beautiful, beautiful instrument. And so I started taking lessons when I was 16. And,
wow.
So it was later than most, but I was told by my teachers, if you work really hard, you could get a scholarship to college. And I did that. And so I wound up going to school for it. I was lucky enough to study with members of the Philadelphia Orchestra and the Chamber Orchestra at Philadelphia at Temple University.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and so I was in Philadelphia for 6 years, where I did my undergrad and I stayed for my master's. And then that led to me studying with my last teacher, who's a member of the New York Philharmonic. I was studying at Rutgers for a doctorate. And
Sure.
so yeah, that's kind of my schooling.
So you made a lot of progress in a short amount of time. I mean, back when I was in school, which was not yesterday, I know, but this was,
Sure.
you know, in fifth grade, we had to pick an instrument. And I know that's how a lot of people started on instruments, but you did a lot in a very short period of time.
Yes, yeah. They didn't really have a bassoon to offer me in fifth grade, which probably is a good thing. I don't know if I would have stuck with it. But yeah, no, that's what I did. And in terms of where I am now, so the career, if people are curious, we audition, you know, as instrumentalists, as bassoonists, we, you know, during our studies, after we're done, we're looking for jobs and we want to play. So we look for job postings for orchestras and opera orchestras, anything. I was just looking for anyone who needed a bassoonist. I'm taking auditions, and so that's how it works. And you show up. We could probably have a whole other discussion about how auditions work, but you know, you go in and you're in a group of 20 to 50 bassoonists, and you go out on stage and you play for some people and you hope for the best. And that's kind of that's how we wind up where we wind up, whether it's an opera or symphonic.
So what do you do outside of the summer? I assume there are other orchestras you play with?
Yes, so in New Jersey, actually, I'm happy to be the principal bassoonist of the Capitol Philharmonic of New Jersey, where we play in Trenton. And I also, I teach at Rowan University, where I've been recently appointed as professor of bassoon. So I've been teaching now. And
congratulations.
Thank you, thanks. I really enjoy doing that.
Great. So it occurs to me as we're talking that an opera singer, for example, once their voice has matured, sings certain types of roles based on the range of their voice, the weight of their voice. In other words, their body, their throat will dictate what it is they sing. But as an orchestra musician, you have to sort of be good at everything. Which is to say, you have to play a wide variety of music and a wide variety of styles, from very early music to quite modern music, large-scale works to chamber music. And given all of that, have you found that you have a favorite type of music to play or a favorite composer?
Yeah, I love playing so much of it. You know, in the orchestra, there's of course composers like Beethoven. I don't think I could ever get tired of playing certain Beethoven symphonies. I love playing classical music. It just, because the writing lends itself really well to bassoon. Usually the orchestra is a little more scaled down. You could hear the bassoon really well. It's very exposed, as opposed to maybe Strauss tone poem, or it's like relatively thick.
Right, just for our listeners, we're talking about classical music in the sense of from the classical period, which included composers like Beethoven and Haydn and Mozart and Schubert.
Right, exactly, yeah. And so back then, they didn't have a ton of things to work with, which I'm happy about, because you could hear the bassoon really well. And I love I love playing Tchaikovsky, Strauss, but also Sibelius, I really enjoy playing. That's something I enjoy playing. Sibelius has very unique sound, that Scandinavian sort of tone, and he wrote really well for winds, really beautiful wind chorales, and especially bassoon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I don't think I could ever get tired of playing some Beethoven symphonies and Mozart as well.
You know, you mentioned Mozart, and of course, Mozart is universally regarded as one of the greatest composers of all time. For you personally, why do you think that is? I mean, what makes his music so great?
I just think it's you can connect to it so easily. It sort of taps into this innate human quality that we all have, just joy and sorrow. Like you can go on YouTube right now, for example, and see 2-year-olds losing their minds to this. You know, and that's sort of, I mean, like that alone gives you an answer to that question, I think.
And well, certainly playing Mozart and singing Mozart also requires not only musical skill, but an absolute technical mastery of your instrument. Because if there are holes in your technique, Mozart will expose them. Just to say for our viewers, this is part of the reason why there's always a lot of Mozart required on orchestra audition lists. You know, even for bassoons, think of the Marriage of Figaro overture, which I'm sure you've played 100 times or more.
Right, yeah. Yes, I have. Absolutely, absolutely. You know, what's ironic about how simple and human his music can be, that's sort of what makes it so difficult to play.
Exactly.
You know, there's nothing you can hide behind. Everything's there in the music. You know, you can't sort of hide behind some loud trombones behind you or something like that.
Right.
No offense to trombone.
Have you played Don Giovanni before?
I have not. So
good. Your first one. Hopefully not your last. I think you'll enjoy it. I hope you'll enjoy it.
I think I will. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So,
Zach, I know that it's always interesting for people when we sort of pull back the curtain on the process of putting an opera together, and I've discovered that people often have a fairly good idea about what happens when a symphony is preparing a concert, for example, and folks know that the orchestra has to spend a number of hours rehearsing and tolerating whomever the conductor happens to be. But many people also seem to think that in preparing an opera, you work with the cast on the music and the staging, and when the orchestra arrives, it just sort of happens, which is not the case. Yeah. So I'm hoping you can talk to us a bit about playing opera versus playing symphonic repertoire. How are the processes different? Are there different skills required?
Yeah, there are a few big differences. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I remember, well, you know, for example, if you're going to an orchestra concert, the orchestra is front and center on stage, and that's the main event, right? For anyone who doesn't realize it, coming into an opera performance, the orchestra is in this hole, you know, it's like, it's literally, we're in a pit, like we're called the pit orchestra, but we're underneath the stage, just as if we're just accompanying what's going on. It's like, we're not the show. What's happening is on stage, and you know, it's just like we show up exactly. And I remember when I was in college, I was a freshman. I think I was 18 years old. I was selected to play in the opera orchestra, and it was my first time playing an opera. And I remember just sitting there. I think we were playing Elixir of Love. I was not playing the principal role.
So you missed out on the big solo.
I did that time around, yeah. But I remember sitting there just like deer in the headlights, not knowing what was going on, just because there's so much more listening that you need to do and focusing, that when I saw the conductor sort of marking time, so there are times in an opera where no music is happening, but you're counting through bars written in your part. And I remember just not realizing that, and being like 80 bars behind where the conductor was. So I've learned since then, but yeah, there's a physical difference, because sometimes when you're coming on stage to play orchestra, symphonic work, you might come on and in the standard programming, you'll play like a 7-minute overture, and then you'll have a break. And then you'll play a shorter piece, maybe 20 minutes long, like a concerto, and then you'll have intermission. And then you come on and you play the big symphony at the end. So you have these breaks in between. You sort of know what to expect. In an opera, you might be playing in the pit over an hour before you get any sort of break. And if you're playing Mozart, you're playing a lot that entire time as a wind player. So you sort of have to prepare for the physical component of that. And you need to understand that for me, I think it's just as important as an instrumentalist in the pit to know the story of the opera, you know, as it is a singer on stage. you have to know the character. So sometimes the bassoon, especially in Mozart, will introduce things or play along with the singer on stage. We always have to be listening for what's going on. A singer could come in different than they came in rehearsal. Anything can happen. There's just a whole another level of collaboration. So
well, I'm very glad that you mentioned that point, because you also say you talk about being in the pit, which does not in any way, or should not in any way, convey to the audience some sort of secondary role. I mean, this is especially if you're talking about a composer like Mozart, the orchestra is constantly a part of the drama that is happening in the story, and quite often is creating the drama itself. You know, how do you, if you take lighting out of the picture, how do you create a storm in an opera, right? You have the orchestra play a storm, you know, stormy music, right?
exactly.
And you bring up another interesting point that I hadn't intended to discuss, but now that you mention it, let's say that we have a Mozart symphony that's 22 minutes long, and then you have Don Giovanni, which is well over 2.5 hours of music. Do you prepare and practice them in the same way, or is the preparation the same, just spread out over a longer period of time?
That's a really good question. I do prepare similarly. So I will listen through the opera and with my score, and I'll mark times in certain recordings, right, just to indicate, so I could go back and listen to each act or each piece within the act. Each scene. And the first time I'll listen through, I'll be looking for solos, I'll be looking for technical things just to check off, especially if I haven't played the opera before, right? So if I'm unfamiliar, I'll go through with the score and I'll say, ooh, I'm gonna have to look at that, or that's exposed, or I'm really gonna have to practice this. This is with the clarinet, this is with soprano, this is, you know, technical things. Then I'll go back again, and I'll really be listening for character. You know, like what am I embodying here? Is this funny? Is this sad? Sure. You know, like the beginning of the first scene, you know, it's like I have this role. I need to understand that. And I'll go back just a couple more times, then just practicing sort of in my mind what I'm gonna have to listen for. This looks like a moment where I'm going to have to wait for the music director. This looks like for a moment I'm going to have to really circle and count. So it's kind of a number of go-arounds with the recording and just preparing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So one of our social media followers has written to ask about reed making. They note that bassoonists and oboists seem to spend a lot of time making reeds, and they ask, and I quote, "What's the deal with all the reed making?" So could you tell us, what does a reed do? Why are they so important? And what's the deal with all the reed making?
Sure. What was Jerry Seinfeld asking that question?
It was. I'm told that it was not, but I can double check that.
Okay. What's the deal with it? Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I happen to have here in front of me, it's just a huge coincidence. I have a reed and a couple things, and I can definitely talk about that. So yes, we as bassoonists and oboists, so double reed, right? We have to make our own, and that's because when you get to a certain level in playing, we know what it takes to play our instruments, and we can fine tune and tailor these reeds to respond the way we want. So that's why we choose to make them. One of the reasons why, as opposed to buying them. Also, it saves money.
What does it do? I mean, what is the purpose of a reed for some of our viewers who might not be entirely clear about it?
Right. So without a reed, the instrument doesn't make sound. Just no sound will come out of the instrument. Just air. The reed provides the voice for our instrument. It vibrates. It creates the frequencies and vibrations that come out of the entire instrument. So without the bassoon, it sounds like this. you want me to do that again?
I think we got it.
Okay. So that's music to my ears, right? A really deep vibration. So that's what we need. But to get to this though, we make our reeds out of. Do you want me to talk about this now, or is this
sure?
Okay.
Sure.
So we make our reeds out of what looks like bamboo. So we start with something like this.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a piece of bamboo, right? And then we split the cane up and use a series of machines to get us to the next level, which is this. And this is a gouged split piece of cane. Mm-hmm. And then we profile it. So we take away that bark and we expose this softer part of the cane in here.
Right.
Because we can't play on the hard bark. It's just too hard, right? So then there's a variety of shapes we can use. So we take a template and we put that piece of cane in there and we get something like this.
Uh-huh.
Which looks like two reeds, right?
Right.
Spacing each other. And that's what the double reed is. It's actually one piece of cane. It's one piece of cane then folded over and clipped at the tip. So you have two blades vibrating against each other. And then eventually we get something like this, which we call mummies. I bet you wouldn't ever be able to figure out why we call it that.
No, it's completely unclear.
Yeah, so we wrap it and form it. We actually have a pin here. If you can see, it's on this metal pin here. Mm-hmm. And we let that sit for weeks, just forming. Because the analogy I like to make is, if you have a piece of paper and you roll it up and you put rubber bands around it and you leave it there for a year and you try to spread it out, what does it do? Like comes back.
Sure.
That's what we're hoping to do with our reeds. Until eventually, we get this. And I like to wrap it. Yeah.
You what?
I like to wrap my reeds with shiny colors sometimes, just to make me happier when I'm making.
Good, especially for comic operas.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, Zach. Just one more question, and then I'll let you get on with your day.
Sure.
What's been keeping you busy over the past 3 months, and what does keep you busy when you're not playing the bassoon?
I've been doing a lot of podcast listening.
Any favorites?
Yeah. So I listen to a lot of comedy podcasts. So there's one called Comedy Bang Bang, which I think is really fun. And then also I've been into a lot of American history. So there's a podcast called The Memory Palace, which I encourage everybody to check out. It's a really interesting take on an interesting format of American history. And also one called Benjamin Franklin's World.
I see.
Yes.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, if one is trapped in the house, one might as well learn things, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's how I look at it. So thanks for that. You all can hear Zach and the rest of the Berkshire Opera Festival Orchestra playing Don Giovanni on Saturday, August 22nd, Tuesday, August 25th, and Friday, August 28th. Thanks to all of you for watching. And Zach Feingold, thanks so much for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Of course. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thanks.